you folks. And René, si on peut commencer, je vous donne la parole. Merci. Ou je vous passe la parole.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Bonjour à tous. Good morning, everyone. I'm pleased to be here at today's Light Rail Subcommittee meeting. Today, we will provide you with information on the status of construction of the O-Train Extension Project, an update on the O-Train South Rail Activation Management Program, the RAMP, and an update on the Ottawa LRT Public Inquiry Action Plan. As I have said in the past, there is intricate coordination that is needed between building the new rail infrastructure and preparations at OC Transpo to operate the system. In May, we provided you with information on steps that are required prior to the opening O-Train Lines 2 and 4. Today, we will provide an update on those programs and details of what is expected in the coming months. To begin with, today, Michael Morgan, the director of our rail construction program, will provide a construction update on the Stage 2 LRT project. Amazing progress is being made across all 3 extensions, and we look forward to celebrating milestones as we achieve them. Justin Kurowski, program manager of the O-Train South Hanover project, will share status updates on the RAMP. Lastly, Bart Cormier, manager of business and technical support services, will share an update on the Public Inquiry Action Plan. I will now pass things over to Michael. S'il vous plaît, Michael.
Thank you. Good morning. Glad to be here. So this session, we're going to start with Confederation. We're going to go through the east, west. We've got a drone flyover video of the east and west that we'll show you. And then after that, we'll go provide you an update on the Trillium line as well as the drone footage of the Trillium line. So if we advance through the next couple of slides, starting in the east. So the first station, Montreal Station. So this station right now, in terms of its status, we're doing the final concrete pour on the platform. You see the structure there is coming together, the kind of the coverage on the platform. The next big activity, once we have the platform pour done, is to add the noise wall. So there's actually a noise wall that goes in between the outside of the track and the highway, so that people standing on the platform will be shielded from that noise and weather and spray coming off the road. So that station's coming along nicely. If we go to the next slide, show you the next station. So Jeanne d'Arc. So this is probably the most advanced station in the east. It's probably in the over 80% now. So you see it's in very good shape. Critically, on the right and left-hand sides of the page, those are the electrical buildings that we need to put in the comm systems, put in the train control systems. So those are essentially finished, and we're moving equipment into those stations that will enable testing of trains on the network later this year. You go to the next slide. So Convent Glen is a little bit further behind in terms of the progress, but still in good shape. You see, I believe this station has the platform poured already, which is you do that step after you put the track through the guideway. So again, as I mentioned in the last subcommittee, all of the track in the east has been laid. They're doing some final work on surfacing and adjusting the levels, but otherwise it's all in place. So very good progress there. If you go to the last slide, or the next slide, it just shows you a shot of Place d'Orleans. So a lot of work there, a lot of work on that new transit-only pedestrian bridge over the highway. Obviously, that requires a bit of coordination with the works below. We used to have a high-speed lane closure in this place, in this location, that's been taken away. And so we still have a bit of a closure on Champlain that's used for access to the station to build out the station, but otherwise good progress at this location as well. And the next one, Trim. So Trim Station, you see the pedestrian bridge that's going from the bus loop over to the station in the center of the highway there, and you see the tracks, they kind of go on past the end of the station. So again, the tracks are fully complete. You do see in the middle of the page there, there is a drill rig that's putting in some piers and caissons, and that will support a future connection over the highway in the future at some point. We'll be able to build a pedestrian bridge that connects both sides of that highway. At this time, we're installing those piers just to future-proof the location. So to do that work, say 10 years from now, once the train is in service, would be highly disruptive. And so we're essentially putting those in now to future-proof the ability to come back at a later date with a pedestrian bridge. So just in terms of the look ahead on the east, on the next slide, we are working at all stations. There is good progress being made at all the stations. Rail was completed. There's some final surfacing and adjustments that are being made. The next big thing that you'll see is the overhead catenary system go up. So a lot of the poles close to Blair are in place, but we're starting to pull the wires in. And we need to make the connection from Blair all the way to Montreal station. And then at that point, we can start doing some testing. We are still trying to target an initial vehicle out to that area this year. We are seeing some pressure on the schedule. You know, the Hydro Ottawa strike, we needed power to the traction power substation at Montreal Road. Hydro Ottawa is back, good news. And so they are helping us, and we are trying to catch up a little bit there. So still targeting the first train movement out to the east this year. In terms of impacts and mobility on the next slide. So we've had a lot of good discussions with the councillors in the east just about the impacts and minimizing the impacts, seeing what we can do to really reduce the effect of the construction project on residents. And so that's been, I know, an ongoing challenge for the community, but I think we're in a better place now. The biggest impact today, and we had a public session just the other day, is really the work to rehabilitate Jeanne d'Arc Road, Jeanne d'Arc Boulevard, which requires us to essentially strip away all the asphalt, do a rehabilitation of the bridge, put the bridge back together, then put the cycling lanes and other features on that bridge to make it safer. Right now, it's a very, I would say, scary location for pedestrians trying to get to and from that location. And so with the station coming, it's important that we do that work. The work is highly impactful to the community. So that's a big thing, and there's been a lot of attention and focus on that. In terms of the east schedule, on the next slide, so still targeting, again, that first train movement this year. We would use all of next year for testing and commissioning of the trains. And then we would look for, basically a handover at the beginning of 2025 and then kind of an opening after that. So there'll be obviously some tests through winter in that scenario, and then probably a spring opening for the east. So we're still tracking well to that schedule. You go to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about the west. We've been making good progress on the west. So the first location, so this is Westboro. So this is probably one of the stations, one of the last stations that we've really gotten started on. A lot of work here, but soon you will see the station contractor mobilize in this area and start to get going. You'll see a lot of activity at this location. Similarly, a little bit further down the guideway at Kitchissippi, you see here they put in a tower crane just to be able to basically mobilize and move equipment around the site. You see, this is kind of, I don't know that they're going to put tower crane at Westboro, but this is kind of the next level of activity that you see at one of these station sites when they're moving in. There's a traction power substation here. There's connections on either side. There's a connection that will go across. And so a lot of work at Kitchissippi. We go down to the next slide, the Parkway Cut and Cover Tunnel. We're in the mode now where we're over halfway complete to the tunnel structure, and we're starting to backfill. So as you watch through these next few photos, you'll start to see them actually having covered up the tunnel. So we've definitely gone over the hump there in terms of the work activity, and we're starting on the downhill side now of trying to cover that up and finish it up. This whole section along the parkway is planned to be closed in by the end of this year. And so there's 2 segments left on Byron Linear Park that are kind of later in the program, but those should be closed up early next year. Next slide shows you another shot of the parkway. So we call this our zone 13. So this is kind of the final, I think is roughly 250 to 300 meters section that needs to be filled in. So we have 2 Everest travelers moving through this area, and they can do 15 meters every 7 days. And so there's 2 of them. So theoretically, we can get 30 meters done every 7 days. So aiming to get this closed up before winter, if at all possible. Then the next slide, we kind of turn the corner into Byron Linear Park. And so this is zone 12. And so what you don't see on the photo is the West Nepean Collector, which is a major city utility right under that location. So this is a sensitive area. We're taking our time so as to not disrupt that collector. But this will be one of the last sections to have the tunnel filled in and built out. Next slide shows you a little bit of the fill in there of, I think that's Woodruff, where we've already taken out the temporary bridge and filled it in. And you see the tunnel there starting to fill in. Obviously, the big thing that happens next once the tunnel is built is that there is a plan to essentially rebuild Richmond Road to make it a complete street. And so that's So we just spent the last 3 years like digging through this area, and we're going to spend the next 2 years rebuilding Richmond Road to make it into a complete street, rebuilding the park, doing all the landscaping in the park. And so it's going to look fantastic when it's done, but still lots of work in this community in the years ahead, I would say. The next one, give you a quick shot at Sherbourne Station. So this is, doesn't look like much now, but you see kind of an elevator pit or a drainage sump pit in the middle there. This is going to be an open air station, and so they'll slowly start to fill this in with the station structure. The next one, New Orchard, it's a little bit further along in terms of yeah, I think we're good on the top slide. There we go. New Orchard Station. So you see where the opening is, where the struts go across. So that's the permanent feature. So it will be an open air structure, a couple of elevators at the end, and dropping down into the cut to pick up the train. And then once we get out of Byron Linear Park, then we're at the Richmond Portal. So this is where the train comes out of the underground section up into the open air section. Quickly to the next slide, you see Lincoln Fields. So this is actually a three-track station. So this is one of our more complicated stations in terms of operations. On the left-hand side, you see a new bus operator building coming together nicely. So essentially the entire bus loop that's on the bottom, that's on the right of the screen, will be moved to the upper left. It's at a slightly higher elevation. All the buses will use that top section. Again, we'll have a fair paid zone where people arriving at the station on the bus will be able to transfer directly into the station without going through fare gates. And then everything on the right at the bottom, that will all be, dug up and turned back into park area. We go a little bit further up to the next slide on Iris Station. So this is following the leg up to Algonquin. So this area from here all the way up to Algonquin Station is an area where we're actively putting in drainage and actively working on I always call it the sub-ballast. So this area was highly affected by the big storm that we had. When we're in the middle of construction, we don't have the drainage systems in place. Getting a major flood is no good. And so we've absolutely lost some time in this area. Well, previously the cut and cover was the longest path on the project. This is becoming a challenge for us as well, because basically a lot of the work that they did got undone by the recent storm. So pretty unfortunate, but we are moving ahead to try to get this work done as quickly as possible. And then Algonquin Station, the next shot. So again, looking very good. I think so Algonquin looks good. Have the pedestrian bridge in there. So they are doing temporary lane closures to get that work in place. Inside, they're doing finishing works. And then the main structure of the station where the trains arrive is actually underground at this location. So this is a conversion of an existing facility that was never put into use. So good progress there. Now, if we go back, we take the leg. We just did the north-south leg to Algonquin. Now this is the leg that cuts off towards the west. We do have another small tunnel through this area that connects over to Queensview Station. So on the next slide, you see Queensview Station there. The pedestrian bridge. So again, there are lane closures here that are required on the 417 to allow us to put in glass panels and other things. You see the station there is in very good shape. It's coming along nicely. The next one at Bayshore Station. So we have there was a bit of a challenge here. So there is an underground tunnel here to provide an additional emergency egress path. And that's kind of the black spot you see in the middle of the page there. But once we have that piece done, we'll basically be able to connect track all the way through to Pinecrest just about. So good progress there. And then the next slide, Moody Station, coming along nicely. Again, no major issues to report here. It's a pretty isolated location. So they're just working away, getting that station finished. And then the last one is the light maintenance and storage facility. They've moved in to put in track. They're going to work on track through the rest of this year and then start to put catenary in next spring. And then the plan is to truck one of the existing Alstom Citadis vehicles to this location to allow us to start testing at the facility. Just in terms of the next slide, we talk a little bit about the look ahead. So it's really about filling in that tunnel, getting our first train trucked over to the LMSF in the spring or summer of next year to start testing. And we're actually going to test from west back to east because the we need to finish the tunnel before we can test in that area, but we're going to try to mitigate as much as possible by starting in the west. And then I know we've talked a lot about traffic mobility impacts throughout the area. So we have a number of long-term closures. The one on this list that we're still kind of tracking very closely is trying to understand when we can open up the Pinecrest interchange. So we've closed the westbound off-ramp for a couple of years. We are working hard to open up a single lane westbound off-ramp, but you know, it's going to depend a little bit on weather. If we get another big storm, that may affect the schedule. So we know there is interest in that lane reopening, and we are trying to do that this year. And then just, you know, I guess on the next slide, some additional impacts on the parkway and other areas. We are going to see, you know, a variety of closures on and off, and certainly when we have to rebuild Richmond Road, that will have a big impact on the work in there and that location. And then the next slide, if we just talk about schedule, still looking at the end of 2026 for the works to be completed. So that's a quick summary of where we are with the east and west. Now we're just going to take a second here to set up with a video. So we have a drone flyover of the entire guideway, and it's really good at giving you a sense of the scale of the project, the amount of work that's been completed, and the amount of work that's left to go. So we'll bring that up, and then I'll give you a bit of a narration because this video does not have music. Yeah, and it's a little, so just do settle in because it is 8 minutes. So this is just leaving Tunney's. So we start to, there's a big box culvert in the guideway here. That's on the left-hand side, that's the concrete pad that you see there. So we're going to be putting direct fixation track on that. Then the right-hand side will have ballast track. You see we come through to Westboro Station. And then again, here's another big long section of transitway that's been converted, is in the process. So this section should largely be ballast. We get to Kitchissippi Station. And then we come out, this is where the tunnel portal will be, just at the start of the parkway. And then you see, here's a good shot of where we started to backfill. The white section there is the waterproofing, so that can all be backfilled now. And then there's a bit of an open segment. This section here had a major east-west 1200 millimeter water main that took a lot of effort to resolve and work through. Another station. And then you see a couple of small gaps here. This is where they're putting in, they have to do special concrete work to put in niches for the fans. So this whole area will be, have basically a tunnel ventilation system, a series of jet fans that are used to evacuate air in the case of a fire, a train fire. So highly unlikely, but that is kind of typical for these modern tunnels to have that system. We turn the corner back through Lincoln Fields. You see there's a bit of a stockpile there that needs to be removed to build the guideway. Lincoln Field Station. The new pedestrian bridge that's in service now. So this is the flyover location. So this is where it splits from the two locations. And if we keep going through Connaught, so there's a bit of it's roughly a 300-meter tunnel through here. Queensview Station, and then we'll come up on the final, the crux of the work to get the Pinecrest interchange open is right at this location. There's a final kind of section of invert and tunnel that needs to be, or box culvert that needs to be created right at that location. That's what's holding us up in being able to open that up. Pinecrest Station. And then there's a long section here where we've essentially taken the transitway, removed all the asphalt, we're converting it into LRT. So all the OCS poles, foundations are in place. They're starting to look at mobilizing track through that area. So there's a big open section there, which will be very good. They'll be able to make very good progress with track and catenary when they come through there. Bayshore Station, so a lot of work integrating with the existing station. Holly Acres Interchange, so we still have some outstanding works there for connectivity, active transportation, a few other things still need to be finished up there. Here you see the rail is already staged through this area. And so they basically have a wide open path from Bayshore all the way through to Moody and the LMSF. So that's a big section. That'll be the first section where we see trains on the west. They'll be able to test through this section once they have the catenary systems installed. in Moody Station, and then we've got a series of bridges that were put in place to get us under the interchange and into the maintenance facility. The buildings themselves are due to be complete this year, with the yard and all the ancillary equipment, the catenary systems due to be finished next year. So then we'll move, I think we'll go back to Iris now. Oh, so stay on the video. Told you it was long. There we go, perfect. So then we'll take the other leg north to Algonquin. So you see here where we've kept the transitway open, the road lanes on the side. Then on the left-hand side, you see the OCS foundations are starting to be put in place there. So this is an area that was all kind of washed out and affected by the big storm. And basically the entire section from Iris all the way through to Algonquin. So Iris Station is in good shape. You see the Pinecrest Creek on the right-hand side, which is now in its new location. So a lot of activity here. You see a lot of trucks and equipment moving through this area. Then obviously, this is where there's the portal to the structure that's underneath Algonquin Station itself. And then we are putting in, there's a bus operator building up on the right-hand side, which theoretically could be handed over before the project's done. So we move to the east. So Blair Station, so that's the one tight curve in the east that we just passed over. Then we see a pocket track here. This is where trains can turn around, or we can add extra trains into service if the downtown core is busy. The flyover that's getting into the middle of the highway, and then you see a very long stretch here all the way to Montreal Station. Catenary poles are up in this area. There are a lot of work on pulling the wires, getting the wires into place. As I mentioned, the traction power substation at Montreal Road, getting that energized over the coming weeks. That will be kind of one of the next steps in order to allow us to put power on the overhead catenary and start to bring a train through this area. But as you can see, the tracks are there all the way, basically complete through this section. Turn around the corner. This is us going through the green belt. Greens Creek Bridge just on the left-hand side there, which is another additional pathway connection. So that's still not open. It's closed because we need, there's some rehabilitation work that we're doing with that Infrastructure Services is doing on the culverts under that bridge, under that area. Once that work is done, then we can look at an opening date for that particular bridge. So long straight section here through to the first station, or the second station in the east. So we'll come up on a set of crossovers here. So this is a location, if there's operational issues, this is a location where the operations could switch tracks if they needed to, or they need to kind of do alternate single tracking through this area, they could. So that quickly pass through the station. You see there's still a little bit of the highway still skewed to the outer edges a little bit. And so at some point in the next 2 years, we will come back and repave this entire highway and restore the shoulders so that you have proper shoulders for the highway for winter maintenance and other reasons. And then Place Orleans is coming up. And so there's a decent amount of work at the station itself, but on the bus loop side, there's a couple of buildings that we're doing as well. So there's a fair amount of work through this area. Then we have another long stretch here. Tentatively on I would say the 10 to 15-year plan, there is a position in this area for a 10th line station, if that ever comes to pass. So we have set up the track and set up the overhead catenary to minimize any interference putting a new station in would require. Again, through this area, we're still stealing some of the shoulder for construction activity, but we will slowly over time next year start to give that back. And then the park and ride's in decent shape. The pedestrian bridge to get to the highway does need some lane closures to be able to put in the glass and the other features. But then the station itself is coming together nicely. Very good. So thank you for your patience as we walk through that. You can kind of get a good sense of the scale of the project just by the amount of time it takes to run a drone over the area. It's a lot of work, a lot of activity, but very good progress being made through in all sections right now. There are a lot of crews working, and certainly this great weather has, through September and hopefully into October will help us greatly keep going. So if we go to the next slide, I'll talk to you now about the Trillium line. I'll give you an update on the construction. So Bayview Station is coming along. A lot of these locations, again, this is the pedestrian bridge that goes to the future development. We do need to put glass and other things. We're trying to get it closed in for winter. So there is kind of a lot of active work at that location. Otherwise, the station's coming along nicely. If you go to the next one, Corso Italia Station, you see a lot of landscaping work right now. You see the orange tarps, which are protecting the platform and the structures because they are dropping topsoil down onto the slopes there. And so they don't want to have anything have any unintended consequences to that. So there is also the temporary detour that you see in the bottom left, just to give space to finish the landscaping through this area. So very good progress there. Dow's Lake Station, happy to report that we have power at Dow's Lake Station now. We were playing around with a massive generator last light rail subcommittee, and that's now gone. And I don't know if it's gone yet, but Hydro Auto has shown up and given us power to this location. So that's very good news for us. So we'll begin the commissioning of the elevators and all the mechanical electrical equipment at this location. And we'll also, obviously the MUP through this area is closed, is a very popular MUP. And so they're working to get that reopened. Carlton Station, I did ask the team when the public art is going to go back in. And so we are still waiting for the public art to go back. Otherwise, again, you're looking at this location on the one side, they've basically wrapped up their landscaping or coming to the end of it. And then on the far side, you see there's a lot of work there still where they're putting in soil cells and different things for the trees. Walkley Station, the next slide, decent, this has always been one of our most advanced stations. You see now the connection is in place from that multi-use pathway through to the development. I know there's been a lot of questions about that connection, so that's in place. We're looking at getting occupancy for the station, getting the elevators commissioned in the coming weeks. Albion Yard is the next one. So very good shape. And so you see in the foreground, this is the train inspection building. This is where vehicles will be fueled, sand added. There's a wash building, that small rectangular building in the middle of the screen is a wash building. So they'll be able to drive the train through, get it washed. And then the new building in the distance is the new maintenance facility where they will do all the heavy maintenance. They can turn the wheels and they can do all the inspections on the roof. Continuing down to Greenboro Station, again, so you look at the station and the right-hand side is where they used to have the construction staging. So they're now in the process of handing that back, restoring all of the kind of adjacent areas back to their normal state. Southeast Station, again, another station where we were waiting for power. So we do have power at this location now. So we're got a tick in the box for all the stations to have power, which is very good. That allows us to move on and start the commissioning of things like the elevators. If we go to the next slide at Leitrim Station, Leitrim Station itself has been very good. You see they're starting to put all the pours in place for the bus loop. And so this is the loop where if you arrive to the station on the bus, you can basically walk directly into the station. You don't have to pass through a fare gate. If you arrive in the parking lot, which is kind of the upper half of the picture, that's where you'll have to pass through a gate to get into the station. And then the next slide, just looking at the bus loop a little bit. This is just another view. So the bus loop's there. So the curbs are in place. And so they are kind of slowly moving their way around with the concrete sidewalks, and they're planned to come in with paving in October. The next slide on Bowesville. Similar situation. The station is in a very good state. You start to see all the cells there. The next slide gives you a higher level view of the different work that's required in the parking lot. So big thing here is to get the paving crews in there. If you go to the next slide, you get a sense of the size of this parking lot, park and ride. So it's a very large park and ride. Still a lot of like systems to go in, cameras and different things. So on the communication side, we see a lot of work there, but the biggest thing now is to get the paving crews in. And then Line Bank Station at the end of the line. Again, in decent shape, still focused on the bus loop as well as the Main Street connection, making sure people can get to the station when it opens. If we flip over to the other segment on Uplands, Uplands is in great shape. On the bottom left, you see there's a free-flowing kind of pass-through for pedestrians, and so that would go to a development that would be on the bottom of the page, or if there's any future building that would be there, and then you'd have to pass through there to get to the gates to get up to the station. And then last one is just Airport Station. It's been in very good shape for a long time. There was a little bit of a rework of one of the tracks at this location just to fix a weld, but otherwise we're doing very well. We're pretty happy with the state of Airport Station. Fare gates and everything's are installed there. Just in terms of the mobility impacts on the next slide. So again, a series of maps kind of in various locations that are being impacted. Go to the next one. In the far south, Hunt Club Road, lane closures are still kind of on and off to finish some of the works. Earl Armstrong, Bowesville Road, that intersection is coming along. And then there's a couple other spots that require some work, and there'll be continued construction and traffic there for some time. So I think that's kind of the summary for the moment. We're going to switch to the video very quickly. Again, we have another video that gives you kind of a sense of the overall system and the scale of the project. And then from there, I'm going to hand it over to Justin Karosky to take you through a line by line of the various things that we're tracking. So the Bayview Station, obviously this is the big change at Bayview is the double track at the end of the line, the new pedestrian bridge there to go to the future development. And then there is the additional building, additional set access point for the community. There'll be fare gates, the building in the middle, there's fare gates and ticket vending machines that'll get you through. So this is the double tracking that was added from Bayview. It goes all the way through to Beach. We go through Corsa Italia first. Obviously, on the left-hand side, you see that's a OCH development, and then on the far side, there's a future private development. Still a lot of equipment staged at that facility, but it's in very good shape generally. In terms of track, they're doing some final kind of cleanup and surfacing and running trains. So we do have some final work to be done, but generally all the track is in place and trains can run end to end on the line. We get to Dow's Lake Station in good shape. Now that we have power on, we can start commissioning all the mechanical systems and the electrical systems. That's a big kind of step forward for us. You see the multi-use pathway there. That's kind of, they're starting to approach, I think the curbs are in place now, and so they are scheduling the paving to come soon. You see a bit of a shot of the hospital parking development there. That's going to be over the guideway, so they are actively working on that. Back through the single tracking section that goes from Dow's Lake all the way to Carlton. So there's the Carlton parking garage. Double tracking starts again. And then we get to the station. Again, the station in the foreground, you see the landscaping is very advanced. On the other side of the road, you see they're still doing a lot of work putting in soil cells and things to get ready to plant trees through this area. And then the double tracking continues. There's the rail bridge and then the Rideau River pedestrian bridge. So the concrete has been poured on the deck. We're working on the approaches now to the bridge. The approach on the north side has the most work. You see the concrete pumping truck there. Then we need to add the handrails, the electrical for the lighting, and then that bridge could be put into service. And so, optimistically end of October, early November to open that up. We keep going through this single tracking section down to Mooney's. So Mooney's Bay is in very good shape. Just working on the connecting multi-use pathways and trying to make sure that we're ready to go for when the train service runs. So it's in decent shape. And this whole area is subject to a future development as well. Big change in the project was adding the flyover there over the via tracks. And then we go into the Brookfield siding, the double tracking section, which has been lengthened. We have a bit of cleanup to do on those walls because there's some graffiti. Then single tracking over to Walkley Station. Walkley's in very good shape. Again, here you see that they're basically down to landscaping and other activities. So it's cleanup. and they'll do the final commissioning on the stations, which Justin will speak to you about. Then from here, we'll split off. We'll go into the yard to give you a sense of the size of the yard. So again, the inspection building there, which is a very good feature that T-Next added. The wash building, this is the main facility. So there's admin building for our staff will be in that building, as well as the maintenance staff. And then this is the old Walkley yard. We are retaining the land and some of the track, but we are going to have to demolish some of the buildings in the future. Greenboro Station, it's in good shape. And then this is our split to our 3-track. There's the location where the train will turn around when it's coming to and from the airport, Southeast Station. A couple of underpasses there. One won't be in service until the future, but one will be in service once we open the line. And then Hunt Club, there's a pedestrian bridge on the left-hand side, which we're trying to put into service. You see this, the pathway that follows. So this will be a stone dust pathway. That's essentially was the original Osgood Trail. So that'll be handed back. We follow the train over to Uplands. So this is the passing siding over the parkway. Get into double track station at Uplands. Again, they're onto landscaping now and different things, working on soil cells for the trees. Yep, the EY center there on the just adjacent NRC testing facility. And so then this is up into the, I was impressed by how close this drone operator was able to get to the station, but must have special permission that day. So continuing further south. So there are a couple of pedestrian crossings that we need to add to get across the road there. As you see the NRC facility on the left. So again, a long single tracking section. Opening up for double tracking just as we get to Leitrim. So it's double tracked all the way from Leitrim all the way back to Limebank Station, which will be very good from an operational perspective. You see the works here. So there's a temporary bus loop just in that side. A lot of activity through this area to get the bus loop in. Critically, we need the bus loop into service first. And then from there, we can finish off the park and ride to give people spaces to park. Again, this is a very long section. There's High Road, which we're putting into service soon. Double tracking, you get a sense of where the community is going to be built out here. So obviously this is the big park and ride. You see the realigned intersection on the just coming into view now. Bowesville Bridge. So this was intended to be a very large, highly used park and ride when it was originally envisioned. So we'll monitor its use over time. But the curbs being in place is very good. Then double tracking through to the end. Again, this is all, owned by a developer. And so if you go to a satellite view, you can really see the housing that's moving through this area. Right now, it's very much greenfield, but 10 to 15 years, I expect it will look very different. And then just the final approach up to Limebank Station. There will be an intersection here for buses to get in and out of the bus loop. And then there will also be an adjacent connection over to Earl Armstrong. So that's essentially the extent of the construction. Gives you a good sense of the area. I do try to give you kind of a regular update on where we are with train testing. Just quickly, sur la ligne Trillium, les travaux de construction finaux.
On the Trillium line, the final testing work is underway in terms of testing the signaling systems and the train control system. The contractor has had 5 trains circulate on the line. We're not near the 9 that we need, but we're already underway. I'd now like to give the floor to Justin, who will give us the details on the Trillium line, and he's ready to answer any questions you may have as well.
So I'm going to run through the Rail Activation Management Program, one of my main responsibilities for the Trillium Line or the O-Train Line South, lines 2 and 4. Next slide, please. So the Rail Activation Management Program, or RAMP for short, is largely a reporting mechanism that identifies the status of all critical elements required to launch lines 2 and 4. It identifies issues, risks, and brings them to Renee and the departmental leadership team for action, for decisions, and to take it back to our larger team to address. We meet weekly to review this scorecard, which we will show you in the upcoming slides. We bring Transit Next maintenance to this meeting to start to build the relationship, ensure that they are prepared to take on the operation and the maintenance of the rail of the Trillium Line when we go into operations. So the scorecard is broken down into 5 sections with a dashboard at the beginning. We have vehicles and fixed components, systems testing and communication of those systems, operations and maintenance readiness, customer-facing projects, external communications, and events. So here you'll see on the left-hand side is the heat map. We note the various status of each of the elements as either on schedule, minor deviation, or a major deviation. On the right-hand side of the dashboard here, we have a go, no-go list. Right now, we are at no-go for launch on all elements. This will start to come into play as we are in the very final stages of preparation for launch. Not quite yet. So we'll focus on the heat map on the left. As you can see, and we'll go through line by line, as Michael mentioned in the coming slides, vehicles and fixed components are trending fairly well. We are having some challenges, and the progress isn't as quick as expected on systems, installation and testing and commissioning of those systems. Operations and maintenance readiness is looking good overall, as are customer-facing projects and external comms and events. So we can move forward to the next slide. This slide focuses on vehicles and fixed components. Vehicles, both Lint and Flirt, are in good shape. They're undergoing testing, most of which has been done, and now we're integrating them in with the signaling train control system. Guideway structures, including road bridges, rail bridges, pedestrian bridges, MUP bridges, are all pretty much complete. We saw some pictures where we're still working on a few, but in large part, they are either 90 to 100% complete. Civil guideway works, track works are largely complete throughout the entire alignment. And then the OC spaces, so bus operator buildings at the various park and ride bus loops, rail supervisor offices, and rail operator rooms are all prepared and ready for us to go in and fit them out we've started in some cases, the plan, procured the equipment, and in the coming months to complete that work. So next slide. This portion, we've broken it down into stations in the top section, then park and ride, bus loops, and then the MSF at the bottom. So stations, you'll note, are a little bit of a minor deviation from where we'd like to be. Right now, we don't have any occupancy permits from Building Code Services for the stations. We are working on those. The 2 stations in red, Dow's Lake Station and South Key Station, had some challenges with energization due to the Hydro Ottawa strike. Good news, which is contrary to this slide because it was made just before it happened, but we have now energized those stations and we'll be progressing with the remaining system installations, testing and commissioning, which had kind of further put the progress a little bit further behind on those stations. Park and rides, bus loops, as you saw, are coming along. Curbs are in large part, and paving is planned for October. However, the progress has been a bit slower than originally planned, but we're looking at a fall completion for a good portion of those facilities. The maintenance facility, also in yellow here, does require a bit more work. They're finishing some grouting on some of the rails. to allow access for the trains into the service and inspection building. We're working on fuel system testing and commissioning to ensure that we can fuel the trains as we progress to 9 trains and through into operations. So there's a bit more work there, but it's coming along well. Next slide. So this section of the testing and commissioning scorecard is a city scope of work. So the city is responsible to implement the head-end system, the P25 emergency radio system, and the cellular system in the Dow's Lake Tunnel. All 3 of which are largely, well, the head-end largely complete, P25 radio, emergency radio system in very good position, and the cellular and tunnel also in a good position for completion and as planned. So we don't have any concerns with the completion of these elements. Next slide, please. This section of the scorecard looks at the system installation and commissioning of the systems within the stations and maintenance facility. So systems in the station and maintenance facility include the CCTV cameras, telephones, the e-tels, the emergency telephones, the information telephones, passenger information displays, intrusion access control, etc. The variety of systems we need in the stations to keep passengers informed and safe, as well as for us to operate the system. Largely, they are installed. We have about 80% of systems installed throughout, and that takes into account park and rides where, as Michael mentioned, we still have a large part of the CCTV and systems installed, which is dropping below. So at the stations themselves, we are largely installed. Testing and commissioning is in progress, and we'll get to that in the next slide. The one element you see here in red is the Albion Yard. There's still a lot of systems, a lot of cameras, a lot of system elements to be installed. And it's a critical facility for us. So we're monitoring that closely and working with Transit Next to ensure that the progress is, focused on that facility and will be ready to maintain the system during operations. Next slide, please. So here's where we get to the kind of more the technical testing and commissioning of all systems. So I'll run through this a little slower because it is fairly technical in nature. At the top, under testing and commissioning, we're looking at the project-wide systems. So this is systems throughout the project rolled up into essentially 2 elements, the SATs and the SITs. So the SATs are system acceptance tests, and they need to be completed before the system integration tests can go forward. So the system acceptance tests in the field are largely complete, but we wanted the progress to be a bit further ahead than where we're at. We're waiting for the reporting to come, and then the system integration tests can start. Again, we wanted the progress to be a bit further than where we're at right now. And it's understandable. There's a lot of unforeseen elements that come up when integrating a variety of complex systems together. So that is why both of those are red. Moving on to the train control system specifically, there's a variety of system acceptance tests required. Static tests, on the signal heads themselves, on the automatic train control and the ATS consoles, vehicles and how they're integrated with the signaling and train control system. And then what we're largely working on right now is the dynamic system acceptance test, which is a test to ensure that all the passenger information displays work, all the signal heads work, the system with all the trains running on it is functioning as intended. So again, a lot of unexpected or unknown elements coming to play there, and they're working through the bugs to move those tests forward. In terms of all the workstations at the Transit Operation Control Center, Yard Control Center, Backup Control Center, they're all in place and largely ready to go. And then the last critical element in testing is the tunnel ventilation system. We have, again, the acceptance tests and the integration tests for those, and they are planned largely to be complete around mid-month this month, so that we're in a good position there. We can move forward into operations and maintenance readiness on the next slide. So at the beginning here, we show that building occupancy permits are in red. As mentioned, we don't have one yet. They're largely planned for October. However, I caution that, as we've seen in the past where they were planned for August and September, now October. The challenge there has largely been in the testing and commissioning of the life safety systems. However, we are seeing good progress on all those elements. So as they do get pushed, the confidence grows that we will get those occupancy permits. Getting the elevators commissioned and the TSSA approvals for the elevators has been pushed as well, and that was largely due to communication systems tied back to our head end and a bit of a slower progress on that. So we're moving forward there as well. In terms of fire life safety certificates, Transport Canada approvals, Canadian Transportation Agency approvals, we are well in hand there, and we are progressing those files as needed to move forward with operations. In terms of maintenance readiness, I'm going to kind of just skip 2 lines and go to the Maintenance Management and Performance Reporting System, internally known as EMPERS. It's a system used for asset management and for calculating daily performance. It's a critical system for us to have going into operations. And right now, it's not fully in place. It's planned for early November to be in. And then we have a bit of a testing process that we need to put in place to ensure that it's reliable and accurate. That has somewhat delayed our internal contract management processes from being prepared and put into place. But now that we're moving forward with this in November, hopefully we can get both of these back on track. In terms of the maintenance readiness for Transit Next, tools and specialized equipment, IT systems, spare parts, and maintenance personnel, they have a plan. We meet with them weekly. And in large part, all these elements are already in place. Just for maintenance personnel, we have a lot of the existing construction staff transitioning into maintenance roles, so they have a high familiarity with the system and all its elements, so we anticipate a good transition. They are also in progress of training all the staff in what they're required to maintain the system. And then in terms of train maintenance personnel, a lot have previous experience with the Alstom trains, so we have experienced maintenance personnel who were onboarded by Transit Next to ensure that we have seamless train maintenance as well. Next slide, please. In terms of operating plans, procedures, they are largely in place at this point. Standard operating, emergency operating procedures are largely complete. TOCC diversions are planned to be complete this month, ensuring that degraded modes of operation run well. For safety and security certification, there's a whole litany of requirements, both with Transport Canada and internally, to ensure that we have a very safe system. I'll highlight a couple of the critical ones. The Engineering, Safety and Assurance case, also known as ESAC, Part 1 and 2, are largely for Transport Canada, and they are in a good position. We also have our operator and maintainer safety cases. We have independent safety assessments, audits, and then our safety management system and security management system, both or all of which are in good position and ready to go as needed for our Transport Canada approvals and operations. Full-scale exercises are prepared. Pre-launch coordination, live testing is in some elements, for example, tabletop exercise is complete, other elements fully planned. Trial running program is very advanced in the planning, and as we complete the signal testing commissioning, the training of the system, the completion of the stations, we'll be ready to go for trial running. Bus service readiness and testing is all in a good place and planned for when those loops and park and rides are complete. Next slide, please. So we get into the training program and the staffing and recruitment internally for OC Transpo and the operations. So we have our instructors, they're fully trained, and we are in the process of building their on-the-job training, which is a element required. We have in-class training and then on-the-job training where they are the person in charge of that train. Only one person gets on-the-job training on each train as it's driving, the person in the seat. Right now, we're working to get that throughout the testing and commissioning phase. And once we're complete that phase, it'll unlock system availability so we can advance more shifts throughout the day to be able to increase the capacity to train more and more drivers and operators quicker. So right now what we see is diesel rail operator training. We still have a bit to go in class. And in terms of the on-the-job training, this is for diesel rail operator instructors, the operators themselves, as well as the controllers. It is in the red. We'd like to be a bit further ahead than where we are right now. However, it's kind of a knock-on effect from the progress in the testing and commissioning of the signaling and train control. We have a plan in hand for all staff, the operators, as well as the controllers, to ensure that training progresses very well currently. And, you know, it'll keep going faster and faster as we ramp up to 9 trains on the system. And then and take the system over and focus on training. Staffing and recruitment are both yellow for controllers and operators. It's a delicate balance between bus operators transitioning to diesel rail operators when we have availability of trains to train them, to ensure that, you know, you continually have time on the line. We can't just train someone and then not let them drive the train for 2 months. We have to ensure that there's continual availability to ensure that their certifications remain valid. Next slide, please. This is focused on customer-facing elements. So we kind of drill down to a few systems: elevator availability, CCTV cameras, emergency telephones, information telephones. These are in yellow here. Basically, due to the commissioning and connection to the head end, largely they are installed at this point, and elevators are in the process of being commissioned. I heard we had our first one go live at Walkley Station just the other day. All the passenger information messaging from OC supplied devices, as well as Transit Next devices, all the messaging on those at the platforms are all in good position. Signage, ad panels are all, you know, pretty much finished throughout the alignment. And then we have the customer service and customer assistance direct lines are a bit delayed from where we'd like to be due to some station civil work progress, delaying our third-party telecom installer coming in and running those cables and tying them into our system as a whole. Our arts program is looking good. I can't wait to see it connected and lit up. It's going to be a very nice art program throughout Linebank, South Keys, and Corso Italia stations. Then our bus service and multimodal integration are all trending well. Last section of the scorecard on the last slide, or my last slide here, is our customer readiness campaign, including a variety of events as we move towards launch, customer marketing and readiness, as well as station customer information content are all trending well, and we are ready to go as they're needed. I don't have a slide for this next section. I just wanted to give a quick update on the peer review that we conducted. In large part last year, it was presented, I believe, at the May Light Rail Subcommittee. We had roughly 11 items that were still in progress. We are moving forward with those. A lot of those elements are being tested right now throughout the testing and commissioning program. For instance, ensuring that headways are achievable and that we can carry the desired passenger count. Other elements such as guaranteed emergency brake testing, some other vehicle acoustic testing, those have been completed at this point. So in large part, progress on those is progressing well throughout the testing and commissioning phase. We've completed roughly 3 of them, and we will continue to update you as we complete those tests. As we move forward, we'll get to test some of this through the winter and see how that goes leading up to launch. Michael, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you, Justin. So we go to the next slide, just thematically where we are, there's basically 4 large groupings that, from a construction point of view, it's the stations and facility readiness, excuse me, needing building occupancy, needing all the systems kind of signed off by the regulatory authorities. So that's kind of one theme. We're working on that. The contractor is, endeavoring to have all that done by the end of November. Trains and systems, so the same thing. We've spoken a lot about getting the 9 trains in service. The 9 trains in service is a milestone, but then after that, we need to run the 9 trains on a daily basis to demonstrate reliability. Out of those 2 things comes, access to give the operations teams more time for training and kind of a final check-in with Transport Canada on the regulatory approvals. We don't see any roadblocks there, but it is we absolutely need that railway operating certificate before we can go back into service. So we are tracking those kind of 4 broad themes. And then just in terms of the handover process on the next slide, kind of a bit of a roadmap for where we go with these projects. Once the system is ready, we would do the trial running. As you recall, trial running is a 21-day period on this contract, 14 days where they need to meet the 98.5%. Once we have that in hand, then we can go for substantial completion. That, trial running unlocks the final issues related to the safety case. It's the final demonstration that the system is safe. That allows us to close out the engineering safety insurance case. From there, it's the handover to OC Transpo to say, how much time do you need to get ready to do additional training, to hand over, to go into passenger service. And so there's a couple more slides left that deal with questions and ways to get in contact with us. But I thought I would just leave this last slide up and I'll hand it over to Renee for her final notes on this.
Merci beaucoup, Michael. Merci, Justin. Je vais peut-être commencer par, avant de continuer la présentation, ce qui est important pour moi.
Before going on with the presentation, what's important is well, as you see how we want to give you information so that you understand what's happening with the project. One of the things that was corrected is that we want the information that we present to you to reflect reality. Of course, we depend a lot on the builder or the developer. We take what he gives us. Because they have the experts, but we still have to make sure that this information comes from the contractor first, and then we make the connection with what's required. For instance, training was supposed to start very early this summer, and we made sure we had the operators ready. Finally, they were transferred to the bus service because, as Michael just explained, we are not ready to go ahead with the training program yet. And it's okay to, these things happen, and we want the system to be reliable. We don't want to push things too much so that we end up with only problems ahead of us. So we want to avoid that. Now, what's good is that once a month, Justin will be sitting with Ian Baker from Lavalin, and we'll make sure that when we say that it's 85% complete, well, it's the 85% that we see and the 85% that they see. It has to be the same. We don't want one of them to say 99% completed and we see 85%. So we want to give you a concrete date. We know things that will be done. There will always be some delays, and we think theoretically, but sometimes in practice, things are different. For instance, the train control system. I talked personally to the big Siemens boss, and we know that here in Ottawa for the Trillium line, this system is rather unique. So we need a lot more testing. Knowing this, obviously, I'm asking that the test be even more numerous than what we anticipated. Because if it was a similar system than the others, okay, but it's not, it's different. So despite what my colleague Michael said, after the testing, we will make sure at OC Transpo that we can shut down the system and to face everything that's a problem. So we'll take the necessary time. That's what I wanted to explain to you this morning. I was looking over my notes there. I want to be sure that everything is well understood by everyone.
In particular, because the 5 trains achieved last week was fantastic, but we're looking for 9 for sure, okay? We're slowly ramping up the number of trains and are slowly accumulating training hours. As we look ahead to handover and start thinking about timelines for passenger service, we are fully aware of key outstanding work. Building occupancy is required at all stations and at the maintenance facility. Testing of the tunnel ventilation system is planned for October next month. Testing of the maintenance contractor's performance, we call it AMPERS, database is still to be completed. We need data from Siemens system to be able to build this data. Final testing of the system with 9 trains is still outstanding. Conclusion of the Ottawa strike is a positive step, and the contractor is diligently working to finish the majority of works by the end of November. Given that, we have significant training hours remaining and that there is a possibility that some remaining works could slip further. We believe we need to be as prudent as possible in our next steps. I want to fully transparent with you and upload our commitment to bringing you the most up-to-date information on our progress on stage 2 to allow you to make informed decisions about our transit system. This was a key commitment that I made as part of our work to address the recommendations in the public inquiry. At one point, there was an opportunity for late fall opening for customers. However, based on progress to date, that no opportunity no longer exists. In order to be as cautious and prudent as possible, we believe it is the public interest to target a handover from the contractor as soon as possible, but to plan for opening the system to the public in spring 2024. This decision will provide city staff and the maintenance team with a longer runway to finalize training and to fully exercise the system before it's opened to the public. Demonstrating 9 trains in service is an important milestone in the process, but it is more important to demonstrate that the service is reliable over an extended period of running time. This additional time, including during winter, will be used to further test, monitor, and measure performance of the system to ensure that it is ready for service. This period will also give additional burn-in time to help ensure that there are no latent or hidden defects in the system. We acknowledge that our customers will be disappointed by this news, but we have heard from you very clearly that Ottawa doesn't want to see a system that has been rushed into service. We continue to press forward with the works and plan to bring another update to LRSC in December. My team and I are now happy to take any question you may have. Merci beaucoup.
Okay, merci à tous et à tous pour l'information ce
Well,
matin.
thank you everyone for the information this morning. I think I saw some hands. Conseiller Leeper et ensuite Conseiller Gower.
Yeah, I guess taking a look through the presentation and listening, it's not a surprise that spring 2024 is now the expected date. Do we expect that would be earlier or later in spring? Is that April or is that June?
Normally we don't commit, but I think April could be a good target.
Okay, I'm understanding that may slip. And I'm taking a look, the project-wide systems testing and commissioning, there's a difference between the system acceptance tests and the systems integration test. You said you wanted to be further ahead with the project-wide systems on both the SITs and the SATs. By how much further would you like to be ahead right now than where you are?
Mr. Chair, I think it goes back to our discussion earlier in the summer where, we were looking for that end-to-end train at the beginning of August, and we wanted the 9 trains by the end of August. And so here we are in September, end of September, we haven't achieved the 9 trains yet. And so, it's a 4 to 6 week delay anyway in terms of some of those end-to-end testing. Once you have the 9 trains on the system, you can check passenger information systems end-to-end. You can check camera systems end-to-end. All of those things, we wanted to had completed in the summer. And so we're here now. We think that there's an opportunity to finish that in the coming couple of months. The contractor's working towards the end of November, but that pushes us right into winter before we finished our training.
Yeah, so there are 4 trains that haven't gotten onto the track yet.
Mr. Chair, it's less about individual trains not getting on the track. It's about having 9 trains at the same time doing all the passing movements. The challenge with the Trillium line is because we have a series of sections that are still single tracking. The crux of the test, I'll say, is to make sure that the train movements are coordinated between all the passing movements. And so that when you leave a double track section, you go into a single track, the train is ready to leave, the train has arrived at the siding, there's passing movements that are done correctly. So it's that 9 trains. If you recall, in 2015, when we went from 2 to 4 trains, there was a lot of time and effort kind of working on that particular type of passing movement.
Okay.
In this case, we've made it more complicated because we've added a number of passing movements, and then we've added an interchange at South Keys. So we need to see all 9 trains kind of on the network coordinating those movements together to provide some comfort that, look, it's gonna provide the service that we expect it to.
So why hasn't that happened with all 9 on the tracks?
It's partly just incrementally. So there's kind of I would say a push and pull a little bit between training and system readiness. For over the summer, it was system readiness. Now we're probably in a bit of a point where now that the system is more mature, we need a little bit more time on training to create a bigger pool of people so we can start doing those larger tests.
Okay. I know in the East, I mean, you're going to spend virtually all of 2024 testing and commissioning. Whereas for the Trillium line, it was a fairly compressed period of time. I wonder if it was realistic to expect that the testing and commissioning phase could be as short as it was with the Trillium line when, clearly we have significantly more time in the East extension.
Mr. Chair, I would say that the difference with the East program is that we have a much clearer demarcation of when we're starting the train testing. And so, which is to say that you need the tracks finished, you need the catenary finished, you need all of those. There's a number of things, precursors that need to be in place before you can actually start your testing program. Testing of the trains, the Stadler trains started 2 years ago. So we've been doing a lot of testing along the way. It's really, and even with the East, we're going to start with 1 train, slowly ramp up, do a series of tests before we get to, by the end of the year, running enough trains to run the full service. And so we're just, I think in terms of communicating, there's more of a clear line in the sand of when we are going to start train testing in the East as compared to the Trillium line, where we've been testing for a long time, testing the trains, but we haven't been able to test the integrated system until now.
Okay. And are you going to have a longer period of time though in the East to test that integrated system?
I mean, the plan is still to, the East is a little bit different in the sense that we have a base train control system. So we've got a functioning train control system on stage 1. We're expanding that. So it's in effect been proven. So we have a higher level of confidence with the train control system. It's being expanded and updated as compared to the Siemens system, which is kind of a new bespoke setup for the Trillium line. So there's a number of foundational things that are different with the East versus Trillium line. But I think at the end of the day, if you were to go back in time and count up all the hours that we spent on the Trillium line, it would be substantial.
Okay. Thanks, Chair. Thanks.
Merci, Conseiller Gower. Ensuite, Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to ask a couple things on the regulatory requirements that's in the staff report. One of them is the new requirement for wayside bearing detection that has emerged for this project. Can you provide a bit more context and information on that one?
So we've been working, Mr. Chair, we've been working with Transport Canada on this file since roughly 2017, which is when we started engaging with them on the regulatory requirements. Over the last couple of years, in part driven by events that we've seen on the Confederation line, there has been a desire brought forward by Transport Canada to see some kind of journal-bearing heat detection, acoustic detection solution on the Trillium line. Now, we ran that system for 20 years and never had that system in place. When our feedback from the industry is that for that type of vehicle, it's still uncommon. And so we've been working, trying to find a supplier who can build a system. But again, it's going to be a custom system to the vehicles that we can install on the line that will provide some kind of detection, a wayside detection to indicate if there's a challenge with the journal bearings. Now, that's not in some sense, people say, oh, it's off the shelf solution. It's easy, just throw it in. It's not. We've already had one vendor who declined to participate in the program because they thought their solution was not technically feasible. We're working with a second vendor now who believes they have a solution that they can put in place. We're looking at putting that in place next summer. In the interim, there are some mitigations that we're looking at, additional inspections and heat strips and monitoring. But again, it's a requirement that was not identified as a need early on in the project, but it's being added late in the program now.
Okay, thank you. And then the other one on regulatory requirements is the updated interpretation of operating rules for operators requiring more extensive and active monitoring of vehicles and service. What's that about?
Mr. Chair, there's a very specific rule in the Canadian Railway Operating Rule Set, Rule 111C, that says that the operator on the train needs to be monitoring the condition of the train at all times and on all states. Again, we view this as a bit of a new interpretation, but it's the idea that the operator understands and can validate the integrity of the entire train set at all times, i.e. that the train is on the track at all times. And so in order to accommodate that, there's different solutions that we've seen. At this point, we are looking at providing a modification to the onboard camera system such that the operator can monitor the sides of the vehicles at all times, should he or she need to ensure that the vehicle is still on the tracks.
And do changes like this that you've outlined in the report to regulatory, are they unique to the lines 2 and 4? Are they changes that we'll need to implement for line 1 as well?
So from a practical perspective, these changes are coming from discussions as part of our regulatory working group that includes Transport Canada. Transport Canada is the regulator on this project, and so they can be more directive on this project. And so we're working through that. Now, in looking at that, whenever we find that there's a new risk or a safety hazard, or somebody saying, put this safety solution on lines 2 and 4, we always have to have a look back on line 1 and 3 to see if there's something else that should be done there.
Changing course a little bit, the western extension of line 1 and the current detours that are in place for buses while the transit way is obviously not available. I've noticed since the start of September, more traffic on the Queensway, more traffic on the Parkway. There's a number of choke points that are happening regularly. Moody Drive off ramp between Holly Acres and Pinecrest, and then coming up to the bridge taking buses to the Scott Street. I just want to know how staff are monitoring traffic and if there's opportunities to make changes to the configuration of detour lanes or priority lanes to give buses a priority in some of those choke points along the route.
Mr. Chair, so we are actively monitoring the detours to understand what is happening where, if there's particular choke points. In many cases, we spend more time on areas where we're actively making changes. So we put in a change, we monitor, make sure that it works, and then we come back and we kind of assess if there's a problem and need to make more changes. For some of the longer term detours, like we've had some that will have been in place, or by the end of the project, 4 years or so. We need to continuously review those with traffic, and if something that we would talk to, our partners in transit operations to say if they're seeing delays and impacts to the bus network, are there adjustments that we can make? So we're open to those, and if there's feedback about a specific location or a specific route, the team is always available to discuss those to see what opportunities there are.
Yeah, and thank you. I'll follow up offline on a few of those that I mentioned. Thank you, Chair.
Merci, Conseiller Kavanagh.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your presentations. It's great to get the updates, and those drone footages are wonderful. I go by the site constantly on my bike, but it's nice to see it from above and really see the progress that's happening. I also want to say thank you to the Stage 2 team. They've been very good about giving briefings, including specialized briefings. They had one last night for Wood Park. And this is a neighborhood that's very impacted by the construction. So it's appreciated because communication with the communities directly affected by the construction is important. And I appreciate that effort. And I guess the big question is, how much longer are we going to have overnight noise? Because obviously with the West End, we're the ones that are delayed. If I can say we, it's been a long haul for, as we saw in the footage, you could see how close those houses are to the construction. And it's been tough on residents. So is there an end in sight soon of the overnight requests for noise exemptions?
Mr. Chair, the overnight requests are difficult to predict. When we look at the guideway construction, including the stockpiling of materials, I would say stockpiling materials is one activity that generates a lot of noise. The excavation or hole ramming of the cut and cover tunnel. So there are two sections left to excavate, and that generates a lot of noise. And then subsequently you have the material to deal with. The guideway construction is expected to be largely complete by this time next year, such that we should be out of the, I would say, big rock breaking, big stockpiling business, but then we'll be into the landscaping station construction. And so for those areas that are close to tunnels, underground sections, that work should this time next year should largely be alleviated, but that will be replaced by more activity at the stations.
Yeah, very much appreciated. I think it's just the knowledge of knowing how much more. And I appreciate Ms. Amakar's statement that we don't want to rush this. We want it done right, but it's kind of a balancing act, and it's just keeping people informed. Communications, honest communications about how far away we are from completion is important. In terms of the off-ramp at Pinecrest, you've mentioned it, and it is delayed. The signs say fall 2023. Is that still going to be 2023?
Mr. Chair, the contractor is double shifting. They are benefiting from the good weather. They are targeting, I would say it's now December. So I don't know if that's outside of one's definition of fall or not, but December handover to activate a single lane. So the final configuration is 2 off-ramp lanes going to 4. So they are targeting opening up a single lane that would open up to 2 to get access to the local community. We are watching it very closely. At this point, we can't, if there was a big weather event or something or a early snowfall, that would push it to next year.
Thank you. I appreciate you talking about the complete streets for Richmond Road, Woodruff. Is that done after the train is, we're at Fairgate? When does that happen?
In the original inception of the project, there was Richmond Road complete streets, as well as the restoration of many areas of existing transitway that will be kind of converted back to parkland. All of that work was planned for post substantial completion. But I can tell you, in discussing with the contractor, they would rather finish sooner than later. And so you will start to see some activity in those areas happen before substantial completion. So there may be an opportunity to bring that forward. They are motivated to finish the work and wrap up. And so they've started discussing with us opportunities to do early works on some of those transitway rehabilitation projects, as well as early works on Richmond complete streets to get that done sooner rather than later.
That's great to hear. I think that's a great goodwill for the community, given what they're dealing with right now and the detours, et cetera. But again, I appreciate the communications that are sent to the community. Thank you.
Thank you. We're on to the second round. I'll just see if there's any questions from the first round. Seeing none, Councillor Leeper, then Councillor Gower.
Thanks. A small question, but with respect to the backfill, great pictures showing backfill over some of the cut and cover tunnel and in Byron. I'm concerned that soil doesn't look like very good soil in which to grow trees. Is that a healthy growing medium for the really significant landscaping that is planned as we restore some of those areas to more naturalized areas?
So, Mr. Chair, if you look at the photos along the parkway, for example, where the tunnel is, so that parkway is in a temporary location. The final state for the parkway is to actually move it further away from the shoreline. And so there'll be another project to, once the tunnel is covered up in that area, to actually bring the parkway back over part of the tunnel. And so we're going to be basically moving the parkway away from the shoreline over part of the tunnel. And so that section, it won't, it looks like dirt and gravel, which is going to provide a strong foundation for the road bed. So that's fine. In the Byron Linear Park, there's absolutely a huge planting program. They're backfilling it now, but those areas where they need to put in trees, they're going to come back and they'll excavate soil cells and different things and put in structures to actually create space for root growth and those types of things. The key thing is the depth of cover allows you to build the mature trees. And so there's sufficient depth of cover, I believe it's 2 to 3 meters, that allows you to plant a tree over the tunnel. So that will be taken care of.
But is that 2 or 3 meters of it looks like gravel aggregate?
Yeah, in those cases where they need to put in a tree, they will have to do some localized, typically what you see, and you see this on many of the Trillium Line stations where they've done a bunch of work. They've been spending the last 3 years driving dump trucks over the area. They come back, they excavate a small section, they put in, it's kind of like a small plastic structure that has space that kind of keeps back the bad fill. They put in clean fill, then they put the tree in. So there's very much a design approach to that. So it doesn't look great now, but it will support trees, and those trees will come with warranties.
Okay, because you have thousands of trees to plant. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
On to Councillor Gower.
Thank you. We had correspondence from a resident for this meeting about the Convent Glen LRT station and changes to the configuration of the Orleans Boulevard overpass. There was some coverage in the news last spring. Could staff just give a quick update of the approach there for the overpass work?
So a couple of things with that bridge. One was in the program, the preliminary design to do that work required a fundamental rehabilitation of that bridge. When you put bikes on sidewalks, you need to raise the wall height to make it safe. So there was a lot of work, including going down to the deck level and having to put new waterproofing on. In order to complete the work, it would have required a full closure of Orleans Boulevard for at least a year. At the same time, we're actively doing lane closures on Jean d'Arc, actively doing lane closures on Champlain. So in terms of the closures, it was just untenable to fully close that bridge. The other challenge that we encountered, and partly you see this in the market a little bit, is the escalating costs, that the cost to do the work became prohibitive. So there's a huge pressure on the contingency, and it was just simply impossible to fund at this time. So we had the two issues of requiring to close the bridge when we already have major traffic closures in the area, and then just fundamentally the cost of being able to do the work. And so we have the design, and I know there's comments about the design, but those can be revisited at a future date. But for now, we're unable to proceed with that work.
But it will be done. Just the date when it will be done is not clear yet.
Mr. Chair, at this point, the work is unfunded. We don't have a funding source for that work, so it would need to be brought back to get funding.
Okay, thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Dudas.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I apologize if this has already been asked. I had to step out of the room to talk to a resident about LRT, so it was perfect timing. I wanted to ask about the heat map and specifically those projects, those items that were identified as having deviations minor versus major. And I guess I'm asking because, you know, once again, you went through all of the items and I very much appreciate it. What is the trigger between a minor or a major? When do you sit back? Because once again, a hydro strike that's out of your control, you then, you know, energize the station, you move on. I'm assuming it turns to a lighter shade of red or whatever you do. But how do you know between a huge structural issue or a material deficiency that is going to hold a project up versus a minor delay? So where is that conversation in your weekly meetings, or how do you go, okay, this is red, but this thing's on fire. We need to actually escalate it to the point of, all hands on deck.
Chair, to answer your question, it's a delicate balance. We look at its potential impact to the overall schedule of the project, how this element would impact other elements downstream within the project. We would take a look at, the potential solution to whatever the issue would be. So is it a solution we know and we just have to implement, or is it a solution that we have a path forward with, or do we need to do some testing? So for instance, a lot of the signal and train control testing is red as a major deviation. Number one, it is behind the anticipated progress, but it's also a critical driver of moving forward with the project into completion. It holds up other elements as well. So that's a red element for us. Same with station testing or system-wide testing and commissioning of all the system elements. So we speak with a lot of individuals on a daily basis to understand the impacts of each and every element that's on that scorecard to ensure that we have a full understanding of the impact that it has to the project. I put that forth through the ramp meeting weekly, and we have that discussion with Renee and the remaining members of DLT, and we adjust that based on their experience as well. So it's a constant conversation, and they shift around between green, yellow, and red as we progress in the project.
Mm-hmm. Are there any of those reds that are keeping you up at night right now? Like, I mean, it didn't sound like it as you were going through, and I very much appreciated the granular aspect of your update. It's just, having learned lessons from stage one, once again, to not ask that question at this juncture would be inappropriate. So that's why I'm just asking, is there any of those items that you're sitting there very distressed about, or are we're still in a good place?
I think we're in a good place. We know the path forward. Testing and commissioning is, I use this statement all the time, is full of unknown issues that could arise. And when the issue arises, the fix can be unpredictable. There's a lot of testing. There's a multitude of different systems that all need to integrate with each other and work together. They need to talk together. And so we can't say that tomorrow when we try something new, a different train combination on that line, that there's not a challenge having those systems talk together. And we need to work through those elements. So the unpredictability of testing and commissioning can be a challenge in estimating a completion date. So we're doing our best in terms of evaluating the progress to date, evaluating the challenges we see. I get a report every day of, up to 6 trains this week on the line, and each and every challenge the operator experiences, the Siemens signal and train control experience, and we try and evaluate, what time it might take to complete those. But, tomorrow something could come up that we don't foresee that could cause a challenge. It's not anticipated right now. That's why Renee said that Q2 2024 is a good date.
Maybe if I can, Chair, I would like to add that we have a lot of stress for sure. It's normal, and this is our day-to-day life. But there is one stress that I don't have. It's if the system is not ready, we won't launch the system. So this is very, very clear in my head. That said, we have a lot of stress. Yeah.
I would like to say I'm happy to hear it. I don't mean about your stress. I mean about that if it's not ready, we don't launch. And I think, once again, with any project management situation, there has to be deadlines, there has to be dates. But I do appreciate that we won't push to a date if it's not ready. Lessons learned, right? So thank you very much, Chair, for your indulgence, and thank you for your responses.
Thank you. Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Chair. Connectivity. A lot of it was included, like, for example, the pedestrian bridges that have been built to work with stage 2. But in other areas, it's not complete. We've discovered this with at Lincoln Field, where we have an NCC path that leads to the station, but it's not all year round. Is stage 2 willing to work with NCC and the city to make sure that we have these pathways complete? This is crucial if we were trying to get more people to the station, and it was definitely a concern right from the beginning. But as these developments come in, we're going to have more and more people who are interested to get to the train. But this is a major issue, the ones that did not get included in the overall plan for stage 2. So is stage 2 willing to work with the city and NCC to improve connectivity?
Mr. Chair, obviously, we've been working hard on the connectivity file with many local councillors to try to find solutions. I think for example, at Trim, where we are future proofing for the pedestrian bridge, we're not able to build it at this time, but there's a little bit of effort being put there. Obviously, we're part of the city. We're happy to work with other city departments. In some cases, we're not able to make commitments on their behalf, and that relates to maintenance and lighting and long-term costs. And so wherever possible, we're happy to try to engage and find new solutions. Obviously, we worked with your office on Severn. We worked with Councillor Tierney on making some of the cut-through connections to the new pathway that's going along the highway. We've worked with other councillors in the east on solutions to Jeanne d'Arc and others. So we've actively engaged and are working on those. In some cases, the difference between it being connected or not is a function of the maintenance, and that's something that we don't control, but happy to engage and happy to have those conversations with anyone who wants to have, talk about connectivity.
Thank you. I mean, at the end of the day, it's the residents are residents of the city, and hopefully they're the target. That the target is to make it as easy as possible to get to our stations. So I appreciate your cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? If not, I'll go to my own questions. So in a few minutes, we're going to conclude this update, and we're going to move on to the update on the follow-up to the Commission of Inquiry. And I think we are walking the talk in terms of the lessons learned and the recommendations. We'll see that today. Obviously, it's difficult for many to hear that there's another delay to the Trillium line. I accept that we have to get it right, and that's the primary goal here is to get it right from day one. There will still be some that will say, well, put more steam on the contractor, summons the contractor, and I'd like you to comment on why that's not needed at this point, or not helpful at this point, in terms of all the moving parts that we have, the relationship that we have with the contractor that we want to be constructive and moving in the right direction. And as I tell my constituents, the contractor is motivated to complete this project and move on. So I just wondering what you would say to those who would say, put more steam on the contractor and we'll get better timeframes.
Nope, I disagree with that, because we're working very well with TNX. We have a very good communication process in place, and they are open to discuss with us. And one of the example that I just gave is our heat map. We need to have the same way to see things, and we can sit with them and say, okay, this is 80% for me. Is it 80% for you? No, if it's 99% for you, so we can understand why we have this different and have a common percentage. So this is very important, and on a daily basis, we really have a good relation. And I have been involved personally with Jan Baker and Michael and Justin for sure on a daily basis, but the relationship is very, very good.
Okay, thank you. With respect to the new timelines or the adjusted timelines, when would the handover, could you just be clear on when would that handover testing occur? What time of year would that happen?
In terms of, just to clarify the question, Mr. Chair, you're talking about like the commercial handover, the commercial?
Yes, the Trillium line,
Yeah.
commercial handover test.
At this point, because of, residual impacts from the Hydro Ottawa strike, challenges with training on both sides, and we know that training is a requirement for trial running. That's something we need to have some commercial discussions with the contractor about, because there is a challenge there. If they're able to finish up everything construction-wise by the end of November, but the only thing that remaining is training, then, that may require further discussions to understand how we approach that and how we approach handover.
For me, I've always been uncomfortable that we would do that testing not in the winter months. And I think there's a perception in the public, because of our first experience, that we want to go through a robust winter testing. So I won't call it a silver lining. Maybe it's a bronze lining, but is it possible that we would do that kind of testing in the wintertime, which I think would give residents and passengers, I think, greater confidence in terms of that the system is ready for a winter situation?
At this stage, based on the timing that Madam Amilcar explained, we will absolutely be doing a lot of training, a lot of testing, and potentially trial running in the middle of winter.
Right. And I've asked this before, because people will look at the slides and they're very detailed, and this committee is doing good work to go over that level of detail. They see testing, but that's, as I call it, it's the factory testing. It's testing that's getting ready for that turnover testing, where Renee is committed to being very transparent and very frequent in her reporting of that. So can you just comment on the difference between the kind of testing that's happening right now and the handover testing?
I think that, some of the testing that's happening now is kind of a bit of, I would call it discrete, so you go one station, testing to the head end, the set of trains testing, to the communication systems and the passing movements. At the end, what we're looking for in the integrated or the system-wide testing is to say, let's put 9 trains on the network for 18 hours a day for weeks on end to demonstrate that the trains are reliable, that the switches and the train control system are reliable, to demonstrate that all the secondary systems like passenger information, like fire alarms, like elevators, all of those things work as one kind of cohesive system. Today, you can go to one station, test the elevators, test the signs, once for 1 hour and say, okay, you check the box. But ultimately, you want to get to a point where people, and this is where the public will know we're close when they're seeing trains running every day, all day, for extended period of time. That's what we want to get to. That's kind of the ultimate test that you need to demonstrate to be ready to open.
Previous reports, you said, obviously, so many moving parts, a very complex project, lots of different trades and people involved. And you see that for the video, particularly in the West End work, which just looks extremely challenging. You've said in the past, obviously safety first, and that if we did have a safety incident or of some kind, that would be of a significant impact on the project. And we've been lucky and fortunate not to have that. But can you just speak to that in terms of, again, because there will be people say, put more steam on this project, and we have to make sure that it's done safely. And if it's not, you had said it's a significant impact on the project.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, in the report, the last few times we've identified the risks. We haven't today spent much time discussing those, but fundamentally on this type of project, the number one issue that will slow it down or cause more delay is a safety incident. And, perhaps that seems a bit academic, but it is absolutely the truth that if we're building the tunnel and we have an incident, that the Ministry of Labor is going to come and shut that site down, and we are going to lose time. And and God forbid somebody gets hurt. That's the practical reality of these projects. And so even as we're testing trains and putting trains onto the network for the first time, you'll see that, especially when we go to the east, that first train that we put onto the east is going to go at 1 kilometer an hour. It's not going to go fast. We're going to go slow, take our time. And then eventually once things are proven out, then you go faster. But absolutely, safety as a function of the testing period, as a function of the construction period is critical to the success of these projects. Any big project that has a major safety incident loses years. And so that's a huge challenge for us to make sure that we're managing that and monitoring that and ensure that it doesn't realize. So we talk about safety from the construction period, then we talk about just the workmanship. Like, someone want me actually to tell the person who's doing the waterproofing on the tunnel to hurry up? I don't think so. Like, let's slow down and take our time, make sure the waterproofing is done correctly. And you can apply that example across every system. Make sure the switch is installed correctly. Make sure the catenary is done correctly. Make sure the waterproofing is done correctly. Putting pressure on them to hurry up or speed up is a race to the bottom on some of this stuff.
Okay, thank you. Earlier this week, staff were very helpful in having a meeting with my constituents to talk about the readiness and the work going into the stations that will be completely new and very transformative for the South End and Riverside South and Finley Creek. And to my surprise, to some extent, there was probably more interest in the multi-use pathway, and we see it at this committee. It's like there's this MUP madness as a result of this project, which is very positive. And I hear it often. Well, you're not doing enough as a city to have better pedestrians. You're not doing enough to have complete streets. And I think every meeting I'm learning that we're putting in pedestrian connections. We've got footbridges. The Carlton, the footbridge is going to be fantastic. I think there's a lot of focus in the presentations on the infrastructure of the train and the transit system. But do we have a list somewhere of all those connectivities and the MUPs that I think is very, very, very impressive for this city, which doesn't get a lot of good news on this project. And today is probably one of those days. But those MUPs, I think, are going to be are certainly, there's a lot of focus on them, and they're really going to be welcomed by the community, and I think tend to get overshadowed by the project. So do we have a listing of that?
Mr. Chair, we have an internal working list. We've never consolidated it and provided it in one place to across all the projects, but that's certainly something we can bring back next subcommittee, is just to kind of give an overview, a summary of all the MUPs and bridges and connections that we've added through the project.
I think it's a lot. I think it's impressive. Thank you so much. Unless there's any other questions, we'll go to the report. Recommendation is that the Light Rail Subcommittee receive this report for information. Is that carried? Fantastic. Thank you. Next item is action plan status, response to the OLRT public inquiry recommendations. Do people want to take a 5-minute break, and then we'll get into that while staff are setting up? Thank you. 5 minutes. We'll be back. Et je pense qu'on est prêt maintenant à continuer.
I think we're now ready to start again.
On est maintenant au item 4.2.
So now we're now at item 4.2.
Update response to the OLRT public inquiry recommendations. So we will start with a presentation and we'll have a number of staff available to respond to questions. So with that, turn it over to Mr. Cormier. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Bart Cormier. I'm the Manager of Business and Technical Support Services at Transit Services. And as you mentioned, I'm here to provide an update on our progress on the city's action plan to respond to the recommendations from the Ottawa Light Rail Transit Public Inquiry. Next slide, please. So just to recall, on April the 28th, this committee received the city's action plan, which was then approved by council on May the 10th. As part of our focus on transparency at the time, staff committed to report back to this subcommittee in Q3 of 2023 regarding our progress. The city accepted and agreed with all 103 recommendations that were made by the Public Commission. 8 of the recommendations are the responsibility of the provincial and federal governments, so we have no play on that as the city. To date, we can say that 56 of the 95 recommendations that are within the city's control have been completed. The 39 remaining recommendations are all in progress and are expected to be closed by the end of 2023. So either completed or sufficiently in progress that we don't feel that it's necessary to report back to you on an ongoing basis. Alors, le 28 avril 2023, le sous-comité du train léger a pris connaissance.
On the 28th of April, the LRC received the city's action plan approved by council on May 10th. As part of our focus on transparency, staff committed to report back to LRC in Q3 2023 regarding progress. The city accepted and agreed with all 103 recommendations. 8 of these recommendations are the responsibility of provincial and federal governments. 56 of the 95 recommendations within the city's control have been completed. The 39 remaining recommendations are in progress and expected to be closed by the end of 2023.
So I'll just recall there were 12 themes that were identified by the public inquiry. I'll go through them very quickly. The recommendations touched on such matters as planning complex infrastructure, preparing project estimates and budgets, selecting a project delivery model, risk reduction during procurement, creating an effective contract scheme, fostering successful working relationships, transparency and effective oversight during construction, accuracy, transparency, and public entity decision-making, safety requirements, preparing for and achieving a successful handover and start to public service itself. And then the remaining recommendations were specific recommendations that would affect the operations of the Ottawa Light Rail system, O Train Line 1. Next slide, please. So the city took a whole of city approach in responding to the recommendations. Transit Service acted as the lead department. In particular, our engineering services group was highly involved. The rail construction program was involved in incorporating all of the lessons learned into stage 2. Our transit service delivery and rail operations have been working closely with RTG to make improvements to processes. And the strategic communications and external relations group was created to foster greater communication to the public and to council and its oversight bodies. We're also very closely involved with RTG and RSTM and Alstom and are very mindful of the recommendations to improve relationships between the city and our contractual partners. Within the city, the Office of the City Manager and Legal Services were involved in the response. The Office of the City Clerk, Finance and Corporate Services, in particular Supply Services and Finance Services, had roles to play in updating city policies, and Infrastructure and Water Services has a key role to play as the main city project manager when it comes to major infrastructure projects. Next slide, please. So to speak to our progress to date, we've been fostering successful working relationships. The relationship with RTG and RTM and Alstom has improved. We saw this over the summer. Accuracy, transparency, and public entity decision-making have been looked at. We have increased accountability through the reporting structure through this subcommittee, as well as our ongoing reports to the Transit Commission and to Council. We are preparing for a successful handover of O Train Line 2 and Line 4, as we've just heard, and we're providing regular status updates. And the recommendations for the Confederation line, line 1, we are bringing an analysis report regarding the axle bearing work that's been done to Transit Commission in October. Next slide, please. Transparency, of course, was a key theme of the public inquiry, along with communication and collaboration. TSD is working with stage 2 contractors to ensure that system integration is overseen centrally. You'll recall that we spoke in April when we presented the initial plan about the role of the independent certifier, the independent safety auditor, and the systems integration verifier who provide additional oversight, which is in line with the recommendations. We're bringing an axle bearing analysis report to the October meeting of the Transit Commission, as I mentioned, and staff have made consistent efforts to ensure transparency with council and the public. We're providing regular updates to this subcommittee, to the Transit Commission, and to council. We have created a new commitment to transparency section on our octranspo.com website. That contains all of our council memos, all of our reports and presentations, including this one, reports on our key performance indicators, and a copy of the action plan, which will be updated as we update you. Daily updates to council and daily media availabilities were provided in response to the July-August 2023 closure of line 1 in order to keep council and the public better informed about our work. And an August technical briefing on the return to service and LRT vehicle issues was held. Next slide, please. So in terms of updates to city policies, Supply Services has made the update to the P3 policy and administrative procedures, which allowed us to close out a large number of the more general recommendations. Legal Services is engaged in a review of the Employee Code of Conduct with updates anticipated in Q1 2024. Finance and Corporate Services is in the process of doing an update to the business case and project management policy. That's expected to be completed by the end of this year, and alone will close out approximately 15 recommendations. And as part of the city's response to the public inquiry process, a records management plan has been established because that was one of the concerns that was raised through the recommendations. Next slide. So the following major projects with Transit Services will address many of the outstanding recommendations. Stage 2 Confederation line construction. Many of the lessons learned have been incorporated into our processes for Stage 2. Substantial completion and handover of O train lines 2 and 4. The axle bearing analysis report that's coming to the Transit Commission. Improvements to line 1 reliability and final fixes for axle bearing issues, which will be discussed in October. And a charter of shared commitments between TSD and RTG, which will ensure transparency and better collaboration between the two groups. Next slide, please. So for next steps, progress on our recommendations that are outlined in the report and this presentation will be updated and made public on ottawa.ca and octranspo.com in our commitment to transparency section. All of the recommendations are expected to be complete or substantially in progress by the end of 2023. We will provide another update to this subcommittee either in December or in early 2024. We'll continue our collaborative work with our partners to improve service, and we will continue to make updates on Stage 2 construction and our ongoing rail operations to Light Rail Subcommittee and the Transit Commission. Next slide. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Proceed to questions. Councillor Gower.
Thanks, Chair. Have either of the other levels of government made a formal response yet to any of the recommendations of the inquiry that we're aware of?
Chair, no, not that we're aware of.
And I know that you've sent them a copy of the action plan. Has that been acknowledged, or has there been any formal or informal conversations from the other levels of government?
I believe there was an acknowledgement, Chair, but I don't know. I'm not able to speak to any substantial. Certainly, there's been no substantial discussions with Transit Services on the implementation of the recommendations, but we do know that they are aware of them.
Okay, thanks for the update today. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Curry, and then Councillor Liebert.
Sorry, maybe I should know this, but is there no formal follow-up? Like when our Auditor General, I mean, Horgan is not our Auditor General, but is there not a formal, we have to report back to say that we've done them all?
Chair, no, not to the best of my knowledge. It's not like an audit where there's a requirement, a legal requirement to close out all of the recommendations. We've taken this on and created an action plan because we feel a sense of responsibility, but the way that the public inquiry was set up is that the recommendations were essentially made back to the provincial government for them to action as they see fit, and we've taken on the responsibility for ourselves.
Yeah, no, and that's, I think it's great, and as we should. I would just note that if you think they're all going to be closed out by the end of 2023, this, one of the main purposes of this committee was to follow those recommendations. So I don't know what we're going to do for the next 3 years, but they're all closed out. We'll continue to get updates on stage 2, I guess, but we'll have to give that some thought, I guess.
Well, Chair, I would say that, the way that the recommendations were drafted, a lot of them are best practices or philosophical in nature, so they don't really end. There's a large number of them that say, public entities and their private sector partners should work collaboratively together in good faith for the public interest. That will never close. So, I think the oversight of council was a significant point that the public inquiry made. So, I think that council in its wisdom set up this oversight body, and I think it absolutely makes sense for it to continue. But does it make sense for us to come back to you, every quarter and say we continue to work collaboratively? I don't know that it necessarily does. So the formal part of the closeout of the recommendations, I think, involves a certain amount of, we've taken these lessons to heart and they're incorporated in our processes such that we're just going to live this going forward.
Thank you for that. I would also just say that the slide you had up there about transparency, I would say, I honestly, I think we're almost over rotating on it, but maybe you can never be too transparent. But I would say that we are really meeting that mandate from the information we're getting here at this committee in particular, and then at Transit for sure. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Leeper.
Thanks, Chair. The Alstom Sustainable Solutions Report. I don't think that's a public document, is it?
Chair, it's not a public document. However, on October 12th, Alstom and RTG will be at Transit Commission, and they will explain their fundings, etc. And I think today we should release some summary of what kind of things that you will hear on October 12th. And we'll see as well if it's possible to release some documents, but definitely not all of them.
Okay, because my understanding is that Alstom has made some recommendations that go outside of what Alstom can do, and they're speaking to some of the civil engineering work across the system writ large, and I'd be interested in knowing what recommendations they have made and which recommendations RTM has determined to take. Will we get some insight into that when we see the RECAUSE report in October?
Chair, the answer is yes.
Okay.
And for me, it's important as well. We talk about transparency and collaboration. So it's very important for me that to have Alstom and RTG to present the technical solution. So we will hear from them, and we don't want to be in the middle of a commercial issue with them, but they will be here to propose and to explain you what will be the technical solution to resolve the problem.
And they'll be doing that jointly.
Yes, they will
That's
be
good.
here together. Yes, I will be in the middle.
Because right now, everyone is holding hands right now, and that's good. And I hope it continues that way. Okay. Chair, I guess the other thing I would say, the GGs play the Panda game this weekend. I just wanted to wish the GGs the very best of luck against their crosstown rivals. Thank you.
Okay, good stuff. Thank you. I don't think I have any questions. Councillor Leeper touched on the axle bearing, which I think we're all watching very closely, and that one really punches out as a recommendation. We know that, and we have been working diligently on that, coming up with a longer term solution. It's critical to obviously the second stage, the current stage and the second stage of the project operating in a safe fashion and in a much more rapid system for a rapid transit system. So I look forward to that. It's great to see that we're making progress on these, and this really underlines the commitment this council has made to follow up on those recommendations. Some of them are very future oriented. If we get into future phases of projects, we'll have to make sure that we're going through the checklist that we have learned for the later stages of transit, which there remains some important conversations to have at this place, given the challenges that we're having with the long-term financing of that. And I I asked the question before, and the answer was that this is also kind of permeating not just the transit infrastructure, but all our infrastructure in our city. Keep them simple, keep them, try and iron out the complexities so that we don't get into delays and what have you. And easier said than done, but I know in my own community of Riverside South in Finley Creek, I wanted to work towards getting a shovel in the ground on a recreational complex, and we don't need to reinvent the wheel there. We've got a good design in Barrhaven at the Minto recreational complex that we can use and build off that. And again, I don't think the public would object to us keeping the projects as simple as possible, and the school boards do that very, very well in terms of their infrastructure, rolling it out and keeping it simple and reusing plans and what have you. So, some may object to that, but I think the force of that comes from the Commission of Inquiry, which really shows us when we get into custom work and things that got overly complex, got us into trouble. So thank you for that. I see Councillor Kavanaugh's on the list. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Now, I was just thinking about what is the pressure on axle bearing and its curves. And we're going to have more curves coming with stage 2. And I just wanted to have an overview of how we're dealing with that, because obviously that's going to be more stress. And I know there's at least a couple going through the section on the west side. So how is that being dealt with?
Mr. Chair, so when we look at the east, there is one curve that is considered a tight curve, and we are following closely the work that the transit engineering group is doing with respect to the restraining rail and lubrication, other things to understand the impacts. And in the west, there are a few curves. They are certainly not to the same degree of curvature as you see right now on stage 1, but we would be applying any future lessons learned to that. I have had my track team review, and we are following that issue closely, but in general, the curves aren't as severe in the western section or the eastern section of stage 2.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions. The recommendation for 4.2 is that the light rail subcommittee and council receive for information the status update of the action plan for the Ottawa Light Rail Transit public inquiries recommendations that lie within the city's jurisdiction, attached as document 1 to this report. Is that carried? Carried. Item 5, in-camera items, there are none. Item 6, notice of motions. I'm not aware of any. Item 7, inquiries. I'm not aware of any. There's no other business. With that, we will adjourn. Our next meeting will be October 27, 2023. And as Renee indicated, I think given the update that we received today and the revised timeframes, that we will not have a meeting in November, that we will resume in December. And November is obviously a very charged month with a number of big files in terms of Lansdowne and the budget. So we will be back in October, but we will pause for November. And again, I'm reminded this is a subcommittee. So I think we've done a lot of work over the last number of months and can take a pause in November and come back to it in December. So with that, are we adjourned? Thank you. Adjourned. Thank you, everyone.